In the esoteric philosophy, there are many, many branches. There's esoteric healing, there's esoteric psychology, but there's also esoteric astrology. And esoteric astrology is actually a very, very crucial piece of the puzzle. It's been called the science of relationships from the point of view that esoteric astrology is a phase, an aspect, I should say, of this philosophy that tries to help us more understand the relationship between the macrocosm and the microcosm, between the human individual and the larger living system that we all live within. And so the goal in this conversation is to get some understanding of the fundamentals around esoteric astrology. And I'd like to start that by doing a bit of a compare and contrast between traditional astrology and esoteric astrology. The biggest contrast is that traditional astrology is actually, when you really look at it, it's an astrology that has great merit as it pertains to the personality life. And people that are not on the path yet, which would be the masses, actually traditional astrology is a much more suitable astrological system to gain understanding of life. But esoteric astrology is much more the astrology of the soul and the soul's relationship to the personality. And when a person's on the path, then this type of astrology starts to have more value in terms of framing an understanding of their journey. So in a very simple way, we could say that traditional astrology is personality-based, esoteric astrology is soul-based.
So astrology is a beautiful science and a beautiful tool to help us more deeply understand the blueprint of who we are. And it's an extraordinary science of cycles as well. So we can not only study our own blueprint, but we can look at how we as a soul move through our life and dance with the cycles. So I work with many, many clients, and we start out by saying, look, this is the blueprint of who you are. This is the map of who you are. This is filled with gifts and opportunities about who you are. And so we begin by looking at that.
Esoteric astrology is also a type of system that has a sensitivity to different levels of evolution of consciousness, whereas traditional astrology is more monolithic in the sense that it tends to have, when a planet is in a sign, it has a fixed, determined interpretation of that. It doesn't really account for the fact that people are at different places in their evolution, but esoteric astrology does accommodate that. Esoteric astrology accommodates that, the difference between a person not yet on the path, a person that's very much on the path, and even a person that's a master. It has a mechanism within it that helps shape understanding of the journey according to where you are in that journey.
So yeah, esoteric astrology includes traditional astrology, right? So traditional astrology, we're looking at ourselves from a much more self-centered perspective. You know, what can I get here? What will happen with my love life, right? And we're all interested in those things, for sure. But esoteric astrology offers the opportunity for us to really ask questions about what we can give and how we can come to know ourselves more deeply, more fully, so that we can give of ourselves more effectively and passionately, right? And Esoteric astrology is interested in the soul. It is an astrology that looks at how we can more deeply live in alignment with or infused by the energy of the soul and the qualities of the soul. You know, when I'm working with clients and we're talking about the moment that we're born, I often like to think that if we could freeze that moment in time and look up, we are in relationship to these great planetary beings that are of us and in us and woven through us and have an effect in this particular moment in time in our structure and makeup. And so each of those planetary beings are great beings unto themselves that are growing and evolving as we are each growing and evolving, and they are on their own planetary paths. So there's this great dance in the heavens going on, and each of those planets is giving a gift and an opportunity for us to evolve as souls. And so we get a chance perhaps to look at each of these planets and the gifts that they give out of this grand dance. So it's important for us all to have an image of the living, pulsing, vital solar system. Perhaps there was a time when we would see a picture of the solar system or talk about the solar system when it was just like, and these planets are moving around the sun, and you know, and there was a kind of cold and lifeless and inert quality to it. But in fact, the universe is alive. Everything within the universe is alive and evolving and dancing in relationship to everything else. It's ever changing and ever evolving and ever growing. So there's some magnificence in the life that is pulsing in the universe. So yeah, the horoscope is a two-dimensional picture of the heavens when we're born. So it is the moment in time, precisely, where all the planets fall in relationship to one another. And of course, so it's something unusual to take this three-dimensional vast picture and put it onto a piece of paper or onto a computer, but it gives us a sense of the relationship between the planets at the moment that we're born. And it is, of course, the tool that we as astrologers use to look specifically at what a client has working in his or her chart. And a horoscope looks like a circle with 12 sections, and it is the heavens divided, basically, how astrologers divide the heavens. And I love to use the metaphor with a horoscope that it's like a castle, and that the heavens divided into these 12 sections are like the rooms in the castle. And then the planets are like the kings or queens or gods or goddesses, and they're all in a certain section of the castle. And that speaks worlds about where certain of the archetypal energies are landing in your life. So the houses in the chart are the field of experience. So each house represents a where in the chart. So where, for example, is Venus hanging out, as it were, in the chart? Is it in the realm that has to do with home and family and foundation, or is it in the realm that has to do with career? So the house represents the where. It represents the field of experience. So the planets have a different relationship to one another, of course, in the heavens and in the chart. And there are a lot of different ways of speaking about that relationship. For example, in a horoscope, we might say, well, the sun is trine Venus, or Saturn is square the sun. And this is a square is a 90-degree angle between these two planets. A trine is a 120-degree angle. And in astrology, these have specific meanings. So, for example, a trine has a lot of grace. I always think about it like a telephone conversation between the two planets, right? How is Venus talking to the sun? Is there a line of support? How is Saturn talking to Mars? Is there creative friction as there would be in a square? So the relationships have a lot to do with the ease or dis-ease, or the harmony or disharmony between the planets. I always think it's a good thing to have a little friction, because then the planets are learning to work more organically and deeply and effectively together within our own constitution.
A planet is an entity, and it's evolving, and it has a lower nature and a higher nature. And sometimes the planet's lower nature is being what is recognized, and sometimes it's its higher nature. And planets are not equal in their development. There are some planets that are very, very evolved and extremely godlike in a way, and there are other planets that are less evolved. There's this whole differentiation between what are called sacred planets and non-sacred planets. And just as a simple definition of that, a non-sacred planet is a planet whose soul nature has not yet taken dominion over its full personality nature, while a sacred planet, the soul of that planet, has won the day over the personality nature. So planets are at different places in evolution, and they are also dual.
So even though we are a tiny speck, the Earth is a tiny speck in the grand scheme of things. And even though we could say we're just one person in the sea of humanity, it is essential, we are significant, it's always important to hold both, that we are incredibly significant, and each of our journeys is needed and necessary and unique. And we are also incredibly insignificant in the most beautiful of ways. So always we have to go on this journey between the two. So it doesn't matter how small or how vast. It is all the one. So let's look at the sun and the moon and the rising sign, because if we know those three positions in our esoteric chart, we know a lot. The sun in the chart has a great deal to do with the personality self. It's the doing self. It's where the sun shines and how it shines in your life. So the sun has very much to do with the present, and it's called the sun of probability. So this is what will probably manifest in our lifetime. You know, most people say, I'm an Aries, I'm a Taurus. Well, this is what we will most probably manifest, unless we start to align more and more with the energy of the soul. And the soul in the esoteric chart is begun to be qualified by the rising sign. The rising sign is called the sun of possibility. It's what we can build in our lifetime. We hope to be closer to the essence of this energy by the end of our lifetime. And it is truly the sole purpose. It is what we are here to give, what we are here to embody, what we are here to more fully represent or stand for or embody and give.
Esoteric astrology looks at three big things It looks at the sun sign, the moon sign, and the rising sign. And I should mention that those are the three most important signs in the chart from a traditional astrological perspective too. But one of the big differences is that esoteric astrology recognizes the rising sign in a different way than traditional astrology does. For those of you unfamiliar with astrology, let me just say that the rising sign is the sign that is cresting at the eastern horizon at the moment of birth. You know how the sky rises in the east and sets in the west? Well, it does mean that at every moment of the day, there's a sign of the zodiac that is cresting at the eastern horizon. And that's called the rising sign, or sometimes it's called the ascendant. Now that sign, in traditional astrology, that rising sign is very important. And for a traditional astrologer, the rising sign is said to be the symbol of a person's persona, meaning it represents how they are likely to be seen in the world or how they want to be seen. So it has a lot to do with image, appearance, and even physical appearance. Esoteric astrology says yes, yes, yes to that. That's all quite right. But it also sees that when a person's on the path and is a disciple, in this philosophy, discipleship has a lot to do with learning to be a disciple of your own soul, to be a disciple of your own higher promptings. That's what discipleship really is. And when a person is a disciple, meaning they're sensing their soul's promptings, they're trying to commit their lives to moving in that direction, then the rising sign has a different meaning because it starts to have a higher significance. It can represent the soul's deeper intention. You see, it's the sign that's cresting in the east, and the east is the direction of the spirit, and it's rising. So it can symbolize the soul's rising intention. If a person who's on the path could live the higher meaning of the rising sign, that's like a gate that can take them to the soul. The birth sign, which is also called the sun sign, that represents the life expression, the outer life expression. It can be said to be the symbol of the personality, but in another way it represents where you radiate your life force in the immediacy of your life. The moon is that beautiful placement that is quite dramatically, I think, in esoteric astrology, it's called the prison house of the soul. But indeed it is. It is the place where we are captured in our old patterns of behavior until we can find ways to work with that place where we've crystallized or where we've grown entangled with fear, until we can release ourselves from that and focus on the sun and the rising sign. In traditional astrology, the moon is said to symbolize things like the home, the mother, the nest, emotion, instinct, those sorts of things. Esoteric astrology says yes, yes, yes to that too. But it goes one step further and says that when a person's on the path and truly, truly trying to live from their higher nature, then there's another facet of understanding the moon, because the moon can also represent the prison of the soul, a liability to the soul, because it can represent instinctual patterns that can defeat the soul from being more effective. So the key is that the moon is an instinctual asset, but also a liability, and that liability aspect of it has to be transformed.
So there's a funny little metaphor that my father would always use, which is that we're born into the moon and we get into our car, which is the sun car, and we drive towards the rising sign in our each individual chart.
So the sun is the great symbol in astrology of several things, and in a way the sun is, it's the symbol of identity, it's the symbol of beingness. The sun is, well, it is in physical fact, it's the center of our solar system, so it's the centralizing energy. Now, when you think about the process of finding yourself, your identity, the search for identity is also a centralizing phenomena. It's to find the self is to find one's center, and that's why the sun is the absolute perfect symbol for the sense of self, because it is the symbol in the sky of the great centralizing force. And by the way, there's self as personality, there's self as soul, and there's self as monad. So there's layers of that as well. All of that is governed by the sun. But the sun is also the symbol of the soul, too. I mean, I mentioned earlier that the rising sign is the symbol of the soul, but then I qualified it, saying it's actually the sign that if you could live the higher nature of the rising sign, it's the gate to the soul. What is it really the gate to? It's the gate to the higher sun sign. It's the gate to the higher sun sign. But the sun is also the symbol of vitality. It represents the principle of vitality. So that's how to understand the sun.
Another wonderful way to think of the sun, the moon, and the rising sign is, and very simple, is that the moon has to do with our past, and it has to do with, oftentimes our childhood, oftentimes karma, which we are born into. It's our instinctual response. It's our bodily, physical response. The sun has to do with our present, and it has to do with the doing self, and it has to do with how we move through the world. The rising sign, this is the key. This is the difference with esoteric astrology. The rising sign is the sun of possibility, and it's what we can build more fully and deeply into our lives so that we live and give the most rich part of our soul's offering.
And I always think that if a person can really get a handle on those three signs and understand how to recognize those energies in the fabric of their day-to-day consciousness, then they win the day. Because when you are aware of your moon sign, sun sign, and rising sign and what they mean, then you can start living your life and say to yourself, which one am I being now? Which one am I being now? And then you have more choice. You truly win the day when you're sensitive to those three energies. So that's a very, very fundamental facet of the esoteric astrological approach.
So there are 3 crosses, they're called within esoteric astrology, and on every cross there are 4 signs. So there's a mutable cross, a fixed cross, and a cardinal cross. So on the mutable cross are the energies of Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, Pisces. And on the fixed cross are the energies of Leo, Aquarius, and Taurus, Scorpio. And on the cardinal cross are Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn. Now, at a certain level, the crosses have to do with our evolution. So on the probationary path, as we are just beginning, the mutable cross has much more say. In other words, these astrological, these zodiacal energies have much more say at the probationary level. When we move towards discipleship, it's the fixed cross, Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius, that these energies work deeply with the realm of discipleship. And then at the cardinal cross, it's more for the initiate. Now, and which is, of course, Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn. Now, just because you might have a ton of cardinal energy in your chart does not necessarily mean that you're an initiate. We have to clarify that. But each cross is particularly present at a certain stage on the path. In traditional astrology, there are a certain set of planetary rulers that have the most effect on us when we are simply marching through life and interested in what we can get out of it, or when we're just trying to survive, frankly. But at a certain point, it's called, the reversal of the wheel in esoteric astrology, but at a certain point, we start to have more contact with the soul. We start to have more contact with light and love and power, and we want to ask questions around how we can give that more fully in our lives. So then at that point in esoteric astrology, a whole new set of planets become powerful. And they're called the esoteric rulers of the zodiac. And at that point, on the path, we are ready to use energies that are of a higher vibration, and we're ready to put them into practice to give our gift in the world.
So for instance, as an example, if I looked at the sign of Gemini, traditional astrology will say that Mercury is the traditional ruler of Gemini. And there's a lot of sense to that. Mercury, as a planetary entity, is the planet most associated with mind, and as it rules Gemini, Gemini is a strong mental sign. And yet, it is very much the ruler as it pertains to the influence of Gemini on a personality level. But there's a higher ruler, a spiritual ruler, what we call the esoteric ruler of Gemini, and that's the planet Venus. Now, when a person is born in Gemini and they're on the path, we're going to be very interested in understanding what is the role of Venus in the chart and how to understand Venus in a higher way as it pertains to mind. And so that feature is one of the ways that we help give clarity to helping people with astrology according to where they are in the journey. So that's one major facet of esoteric astrology.
Individuals have charts, and we've established that, but also nations have charts. Cities are influenced by zodiacal energies. So it's not just the individual, it's the places in which we live and move and have our being that also have charts. So that's another whole fascinating realm of astrology. And you can imagine that if you are living in a place that is in alignment with your own individual astrology, and you're living in a country or a city that's really resonant with your individual astrology, you can imagine the power and potential that has. Just as nations have their own charts and their own zodiacal influences, we also begin to see how certain nations get along, and certain nations have great friction between them, and we could look to the charts to see some of that in action. So our spiritual identity, who we are, is enormously important to understand that. If we know who we truly are, we'll know what to do. We'll know what actions to take. We'll know how better to give our gifts. Astrology is a remarkable tool to allow us to be able to think about and talk about and meditate upon our individual energetic makeup and use it to its fullest potential. And of course, with astrology, we can also identify those places where we are stuck or where we need to shine the light to have more soul infusement or where alignment. So astrology also points the way and says, look here, because this needs to be addressed, or pay attention here. And, you know, frankly, as an astrologer, I always feel like if a client walked in the door and I said to them, this is your rising sign and this is its mantram, and sent them on their way, they have a tremendous amount to work with. We have a tremendous amount to work with just the energy of the rising sign as a beacon, as a light, as a beautiful beckoning to what we are capable of becoming. So astrology is a great gift for each of us to meet our fullest potential and give our gift to humanity at this critical time.